I'm going to call us to order and invite everyone to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda? I'll make the motion. Thanks, Meg. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous approval. Thank you. Item 4, approval of consent agenda. This includes approval of the January 23rd, 2024 Board of Education special meeting minutes, the approval of January 25th, 2024 Board of Education special meeting minutes, a donation from Shutterfly to Valley View Elementary School in the amount of $1,303.19, a donation from Donald Chamberlain of the Middlesex Vocal Cords to Portland High School in the amount of $100, and approval of an out-of-state field trip for the PHS DECA group to Anaheim, California from April 25th to the 30th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
A second.
Thanks, Sarah. Any discussion? So I'm going to ask Charles for, there's one item he wanted to explain.
Yeah, this is definitely a feel-good moment that I don't want to miss. So you notice in there that there's a donation of $100 from Donald Chamberlain. So at the Vocal Cords concert, Sam Tucker, Dylan, Paige, and Lily, who are over here, we're working the sound booth, in the lighting booth, but working the soundboard and the lights and making sure everything was running smoothly, as they do for us all of our board meetings, when they were observing and noticed that one of the singers had a medical emergency. And they acted very quickly and got help very quickly to make sure that the gentleman was okay. And I'm very happy to say that the gentleman is okay and was provided that care because of their quick action. They didn't hesitate. They immediately got the right people to provide the care. The donation tonight is from that gentleman and certainly signals his appreciation to Sam, Lily, Paige, and Dylan for their good work and for being on top of things and making sure that he was taken care of. So I'm really proud of them. I know you join me in gratefully accepting the donation. We're really happy that Mr. Chamberlain is okay, but really very much appreciate all of your Johnny on the spot and hard work and paying attention. So thank you very much.
That was the whole audience also.
That's great. Excellent. That's a great story. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Great, that was unanimous. Audience of citizens, do we have anyone with us this evening in person or online who wishes to address the board at this point?
Give it like a second.
Of course, yeah. Okay. Okay, and there will be a second opportunity for audience of citizens at the end of the meeting. All right, we do not have anything on the agenda for the Portland Public Schools Spotlight this evening, so we're going to move along to the student representative report. And we have Caitlin with us this evening.
The month of March is just around the corner, so unfortunately winter sports are wrapping up their respective seasons. Recently, indoor track had their Shoreline Conference meet at Hill House in New Haven. Portland athletes placed top 3 across various running events, including the 300, 600, 1600, and 3200 meter distances. Additionally, the cheer team has their first competition this weekend, which is taking place in Westbrook. Across all the winter sports, senior nights have been held throughout the past few weeks. Wrestling and girls basketball had successful senior nights, and the boys basketball and cheer team have their celebrations this Friday. In regards to fundraisers, Project Grad is hosting a Burger Heaven event tonight. The girls volleyball team is also hosting a fundraiser at the game tonight. Additionally, the senior class is hosting a bake sale at the boys' senior night game on Friday. Lastly, musical Musical rehearsals are going well, and the official show dates are growing closer every day. Make sure to buy tickets for the shows held on March 22nd and 23rd.
Awesome. Are those on sale yet, Caitlin?
I'm not...
I don't think the website opened yet.
Not
Yeah.
yet.
They're
All
waiting
right.
on it.
Soon.
You'll have to let us know when they are.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any questions for Caitlin? And Liam's not with us online. I just want to make sure we don't skip him if he was intending to speak. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, communications and updates. We're going to start with the superintendent's report.
Okay. So included in your packet, a few very important notifications for you. First, you see that we do have Dawn's official. She noticed us verbally last time, but I do have in here letter indicating that she intends to retire at the end of this year. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that process in a minute. I wanted to make sure you have that very important communication. Second one in there, we did receive notice from a special education teacher who I care very much for and hope she's well. That is Christina Mazzi. She has taken a retirement, and we wish her well and a speedy recovery, as I know that she's battling, and I hope she's well soon. So that's another notification for you in there. Also, we did receive a letter of resignation from a paraprofessional, Shannon. Wish Shannon all the best in her future career endeavors. Let me stop there. Any questions about the retirements or resignation? Okay. Did include in there was an email dated January 25th from Sarah Cohn expressing her opinion about the budget. So I wanted to make sure that you saw that. I do have in here also the latest enrollment report. So those are the communications I have for you, the resignations, retirement, notice, email from a parent, and the enrollment report. And stop and see if there are any questions about any of those matters. All right, so
The enrollment dropped 8 students, which is based on the pattern last year, is abnormal.
don't know, Steve. People move or that's.
Seems like a lot. It's been going a lot over 2, up or down, up and boom, 8. 1 month seems like a lot.
Winter blues. I could find out if you want more information.
Yeah, just curious if you knew. I'm not
Not off the top of my head.
Charles, if I can interrupt.
Sure.
I do know, I asked the schools, because when I saw that, and there were quite a few transfers out and a few outplacements. So, and I have detailed, if you want that, I can email
I don't understand.
So, outplacements.
Yeah, but they're still students at the
Still,
school.
yeah, they'd still be on our books.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be at the schools though. Is that accounted for in a different line? Let me find out.
Yeah.
Let me get you more information for next meeting on that one. Okay, that reminds me. Is Dawn online tonight, Dylan? Is Dawn, or is she joining us in person?
She's not online yet.
Okay. All right. All right. So those are the communications. I do have a few updates for you. So first, we included in your packet, Eric's report isn't until March, but between now and March, we do have a professional development day. So I thought you'd be interested to see what the schedule for the professional development day is. In particular, I know that the curriculum committee has talked a lot about, and it's part of our strategic plan, and Eric has been regularly talking about our adjustments in district to the science of reading, and some of the decisions we've made with how we make sure we align to those components of the science of reading. You'll see in here that our K-3 faculty is taking a look at 2 programs that address additional components of the science of reading that we need to incorporate into our curriculum. I'm very interested in getting some feedback as folks look through those materials and make some important decisions. Certainly that would be a focus of Eric's forthcoming report and discussions at the curriculum committee, as I know that that's a really important initiative that we're well in the midst of.
So Charles, Bookworms and Wisdom are 2 programs that were not part of the original 7 approved list.
Right. So
but they are ones that were de facto approved when all of those waivers were approved, and so am I correct in my reading that those are programs we're exploring to supplement the programs we're currently using?
Exactly. So the way the law was originally written, there were 7 full programs that incorporated all of the components of the science of reading that we were directed to choose from. It was sort of, hey, districts, you need to replace your current literacy program, and here are the 7 you may choose. Or, if you want to advocate for your current practices, you could fill out a waiver. Many districts did, we did not. We were moving forward with vetting and choosing one of those programs. The districts that selected or submitted the waivers, those waivers were reviewed. The state cherry-picked from those waivers additional programs, including the 2 that you see here, that are now part of a compendium of resources in addition to those 7 approved programs. So the way the law is written now is that you must have a program aligned to the science of reading that shall include either one of those full 7 approved programs, which are quite pricey and a heavy lift, or elements from the compendium that match those components: literacy, comprehension, vocabulary, phonics, phonemic awareness, and all of the ones that make up the science of reading. So that's a direction we're exploring now, and ultimately we're going to make a decision about whether we cherry pick from the compendium or go back to choosing one comprehensive program. It's pretty complicated, but
Yes, it
that's
is.
where we are.
All right, thank you.
So we are heading in that direction. All right, another really interesting thing happened in the state that some of you may be aware of. I'm not sure if Cromwell had this same experience. So this past week, the State Department of Education offered an opportunity to teachers in the district. They released $4 million that they said that any teachers could go and apply for as part of a Donors Choose initiative. So basically it was, hey, give us your good ideas. I'm not sure, did anybody in Cromwell or did you jump on it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, right?
Many people jumping on it. It's
Yeah.
great.
It was great. So many teachers here in Portland also jumped on it, as did my wife, although she was a little bit late and didn't get what she wanted. I saw her trying to fill it out at the last minute, but she missed it. Within 72 hours, that $4 million was gone. Like, instantly. That sort of gives you a sense of the need amongst teachers in the state. Our teachers were very much on it. We had 7 teachers apply for and receive awards as part of that in the amount of, let's see, $800, $410, $1,000, $782, $898, with all of these resources and things that they asked for and are receiving. So I'm going to provide you in the March board pack, because I just got this, right? This list of what our teachers asked for and received. And I'm also going to need board approval, because our policy says that if we accept donations, which is what this is, because it was part of Donors Choose, that you would otherwise need to approve these donations. So I wanted to let you know that's happening because we're getting the stuff now. Literally, and Kim will tell you, teachers jumped on this website, put in their information within 72 hours. The money was gone, and teachers were notified of what they were approved to get. And
Deliveries.
Amazon is delivering things, right? So it happened that fast that we didn't have time to go through the process, which would involve you accepting the stuff before we get it.
Given how slowly things seem to move in the state, this is, I'm a little, like, my mind is a little bit blown that it happened that rapidly. That's
Sounds
all.
like
I
a
wasn't going to be
marketing pitch
snarky
to
and
me.
sorry.
Right.
They should do that with the
Sort
science.
of feels like if you can do it, maybe we can take a page out of that book for some other funding.
Yeah. So I do have here a list of what we're getting.
Yeah.
And, of course, we've gone through it and we're making sure these are pretty standard resources, whiteboards and things. But there's some furniture that teachers have asked for. We're going to review this carefully. We're going to make sure you get a look at it. If we have any issues with any of the things that the teachers have asked for, we'll certainly raise those concerns with the teachers. In my first look at this, which again, I just got today, it always seems like this happens the day of board meetings, I don't see anything in here that, there would be any objections to. But I'm going to review it a little bit more careful, make sure you get a copy of it so you can review it, and then ask for the board to take action to accept the donations at the March board meeting.
So I just have a question. Are the resources they're receiving tied to a particular curricular activity,
Or was it just, this is what we would like to have because this is what I need in the classroom?
This is like things like Expo
like
low order
Christmas.
dry erase markers.
It's supplies.
Supplies,
Christmas and
multicolored bins, crayons, headphones for students to use, binders, whiteboards, pencils.
Okay.
You know,
It's a useful thing, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's sort of a reflection of the need that's out there, right? That is a function of the freeze we've been in
That's
for
what I
2
was
years
gonna say.
now.
That sounds like supplies that we haven't been able to purchase because we've been in a freeze for several years.
Correct. And I think that's why teachers across the state jumped on this in 72 hours, spent $4 million. I think that tells us a lot about where we are.
Yeah.
So it's both a good news and an eye-opening thing, and that's where we are.
Did you say eight of our teachers were awarded?
7.
Seven. Well, that's wonderful.
But again, I didn't want to get too far out in front of the board, but because we didn't have any ability to approve these as teachers were entering them, we're just learning now what the teachers asked for and got. And literally this happened over the course of 72 hours. That's how fast it was. I'm sure that you had a similar experience in Cromwell.
Yeah, I missed the window.
Yeah.
But I felt it was that, I don't really need anything, so I'll let other people get what they need.
My wife missed the window too, and there were a few curse words said.
That's cool. Thanks.
All right. One other thing, so as you know, Dawn has submitted her retirement letter. So just so you're aware, we posted the position internally. So our contracts call for us to 5 days post internally. It was posted on Monday. So we'll go and post the position externally Monday next week. It will then go up on CT Read, and anybody with the appropriate credentials can apply for it. My planning is to leave that position posted for February and most of March, and I'm thinking late March, early April, we'll get into the process of selecting the next Director of Student Services. That process is going to involve a similar process that we used for selecting administrators that will involve 3 committees that work independently of each other. One will screen candidates, look at all of the information that's submitted on paper, resumes, transcripts, letters of reference, statements of philosophy, all of those things. The paper screening committee will then select and recommend to an interview committee, which is a separate group of people, will do interviews. I think many of you have been through this process before. Sure. The interview committee will then select from that pool a group of people to recommend to a third committee, which is the performance task committee. Each of these will be chaired by administrators and teachers in the district, and will design the performance task. There is going to be a very important role for board members, and I'm hoping that as you think about would you rather be on the paper screening, the interview, or the performance task committee, you don't have to let me know right now, but certainly we'll invite you, students, parents, teachers, administrators, stakeholders, any number of people who are interested. This process allows many, many different people to involve in it as opposed to just one interview committee. That's why I like it. At the end of the process, the 3 committees' chairs kind of collaborate and then recommend to me the finalists, and then the finalist is brought to the board to be interviewed and for appointment. I'm hoping sometime late April, so we can have some transition time.
Charles, what does the performance task committee entail?
Right, so we're going to come up with a challenge, a real world challenge. It might be something like, how do you manage outplacements? How do you manage and ensure that IP needs are met? CT SEDS, here's a student IEP, take a look at it. It will be some aspect that I think Dawn may even have some input in. Problems of practice she's confronting right now. It shouldn't be a theoretical exercise. It should be, what do you have to manage right now to hit the ground running? Whether it's managing budget, student programming, evaluation, supervision, there's no lack of things we can come up with. I don't want to say what it is because it's really the responsibility of that committee to design the performance task, give it, and then score it. So that's the one I'd want to be on.
Just a quick question. Are we looking at the job description? Because her job description is humongous. Is there any changes coming to new position in terms of?
That will go through personnel, but
I understand that.
I think when we work, that's a good agenda item for the personnel committee. Trish, why don't we throw that on the next personnel committee meeting? We'll put that job description on the table and make sure the personnel committee is comfortable with it as it's currently designed, or if the personnel committee would recommend any modifications. But that's a great idea.
Yeah. And maybe Dawn has some input too.
As long as it says in all other things assigned by the superintendent, I'm good.
Right. The catch-all phrase.
Okay, so that brings me to two letters I included for you. And both of these dovetail nicely with what Stephanie's going to present to you tonight and what Dawn's going to present to you tonight. The first one I want to talk about is some good news. This is a good news, bad news, and I always like to start with the good news. Tom popped over to see me Monday after having an additional conversation with our insurance consultant. And she went back to Cigna and implored them to reconsider what was a 12.7%, which is where we were a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Connecticut. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Connecticut, not Cigna. First mistake. Yeah, oops, all right. Connecticut did come back with not a 12.7, but a 9.9. So, do you feel like you're having deja vu? This is exactly what happened last year, right? Where we put the placeholder in. I think we were at like, 5.5, and it came back at 4.7. Something like this happened last year, too. What the difference between the 12.7 and the 9.9 is $75,782. Okay? So that leaves us with a sort of decision to make. Right? There are clearly two options. Right? We could take that money and reduce the budget. Right? If we just took that money out of the insurance line item where Stephanie has it now, that would reduce the board-approved budget from 5.08 to 4.76. The other option, again, if you remember last year, this was the same conversation, is to leave that there and be able then to use that funding to make up for other cuts we made, right? So, I'm going to entertain or make a recommendation, a discussion about leaving it there, and it's in the following context. I have pretty good powers of inference, and I think I heard some very clear reservations on the board about this student activity pay-for-play fee that we do have as a placeholder in the budget as a new revenue stream in the amount of $46,000. I know there's a lot of reservation on the board as we consider equity, logistics, and other implications of that. It is something we committed to talking about this spring and making a decision to do. If we decide to do it, then that's a potential for $46,000, which could be higher if we make the fee larger, or lower if we make the fee smaller, right? But $46,000 is kind of where we have that placeholder in the budget. By applying the $76,000, or keeping the $76,000 in the budget, that informs our thinking about that if we decided not to go forward with it because we don't think it would reflect the community's wishes. We wouldn't be in an additional position of having to identify other cuts because that money is there. Really following me on the logic of that?
Yep.
Additionally, we've made significant other cuts to supplies, equipment, and people. Right? We have reduced certified and non-certified positions. You're all aware of that. I know how difficult those conversations were. Certainly, if we left that $76,000 there, we would have it available to potentially keep some of those positions, or if we decide not to, restore some of the other cuts we've made. And then the final one I just want to put out there is, student support services every year is a X factor in the budget that keeps us up at night. Right now, you're about to hear next that it's biting us in the butt, right? The winds are not blowing in our favor right now. These are mandated services. They're developed as part of students' individualized education plans. We have to provide these services. You know that Dawn budgeted for what we know we have this year, just like she budgeted for what we know we have last year, but those numbers changed. And this year she again said, Charles, it would be a good idea if you put a $100,000 placeholder for any unanticipated new costs. I wish we had done that last year and it worked its way through the budget process. We could do that again next year. So there's no lack of places that we could apply that $76,000 or take it out and reduce the overall percent increase that is now going forward to Ryan and the Board of Selectmen. Ultimately, that's a board decision, so I need to throw it out there for you to consider. It's not on the agenda tonight as an action item, so it would, if you're going to take no action, the 5.8 is going forward. If there's an interest in adjusting the budget, that can be we can have that as an old business action item on March's agenda. So right now, I think it's mostly just for conversation and information, not asking for any amendments to the budget. This is all, like I said, less than 24-hour breaking news for you, but I wanted to make sure that you had the information as early and quickly as possible.
I have a question, and maybe Stephanie, this may be more for you, but I don't remember the total dollar that the 5.08% increase represented, but I'm actually kind of curious. Could you project what percent increase over projected actuals for this year we've put forward? Because if we have a $300,000 deficit, it's not going to be a 5.08% increase over actuals. It's over what was budgeted for this year.
Correct.
So just getting a handle on that would help me at least.
Okay.
It would be an estimate, because you don't really know what the
Totally.
deficit's
Oh,
gonna be.
absolutely. Understood.
You're done with that.
Yep.
You had used the number 46,000 a number of times for play for pay, but the memo you did on January 24th and everything else I have documentation said it was 43,000.
Is it 40 or 46?
46.
46.
You-
Typo. 46 is the number.
It is, okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure which date that is.
This is January 24th. This was the most,
Was it?
this is the one that we, I think,
So it's
used for
$3,000
the basis of
typo
our
there.
budget vote, right? When we voted on the budget.
That's what.
Yeah.
Between the percentages,
Yeah.
the numbers that,
43 was the number, I didn't even,
Yeah.
46 didn't even register for me until you just said it out loud, and I said, that's not right. But anyway, it's,
That could be my error, the difference between 43 or 46.
It's a placeholder,
Yeah.
because you're knowing that.
It could be higher or lower based on the amount that we charge. We charge 150 or 100 or 25, that number can move. It was just a really rough, these are the number of athletes we have, times 100 at the high school level, times 50 at the middle school level. That wasn't scientific or really thought out. It was just based on, I think, what they're doing in Cromwell, just to kind of open the conversation.
Right.
But this is the work we have ahead of us in policy and the full board is figuring out what that number is. And of course, as Tim has mentioned, whether it only applies to athletics, whether it applies to arts or other types of extracurricular, co-curricular programming. So whether it's 43 or 46,
it just, for me, it was just a point of accuracy. If you're working with numbers, we should. But the other point, if anybody else wants to go next, I don't want to take up. If not, I would just, I feel strongly that we should, in fact, what I consider do the right thing and say, we approved the budget at 5.08, compromised budget. I didn't like it. I voted for it because I felt it was important that we have unity and that, I accept that the best effort was made to bring things down, even though towards the end, board members started putting stuff back in. We're here. We made this budget. But this, to me, just rings too much of a year ago when the difference was we had not yet passed the budget and we learned about healthcare savings and the board went forward and kept that money in and approved it and sent to the Board of Selectmen a budget that was really greater than what we had proved in our own documents that were necessary. And now we've already passed the budget. We have this opportunity now to say, well, we've said this is what we need, this is what the superintendent has assured us he can operate with, even though it's a very tight budget. And now we get I had the number written down, almost $6,000 savings. And to me, it's not like ethical, not ethical. It's about doing the right thing and stepping up for the community who we're going to be asking for a lot more than this when we go to a referendum next year about a school. And that this is a good step in the right direction of showing good faith and not sending the Board of Selectmen a budget that we know already we've established savings in that. And I was disappointed we can't do a motion tonight on it. I didn't realize that when I looked at it, but that's fine too. But that's just I have a very strong opinion about that.
And I would just like to go and say, I would not change the 5.08 budget It's a fluid budget. We don't know what it's going to end up being. We don't know anything between now and the end of June when school closes. You know, we're going to see changes. We're going to see money coming from the state. We may get more in ECS money. We may get further cuts. You know, I've heard cuts in Title I and Title II programs coming out of the federal government. I think it's too fluid at this point. And I know that the Board of Selectmen probably will look at it and know you've got that $78,000, so let's take that out again. I also don't want to promise that we're going to replace things that we've taken out when we have sweated blood, sweat, and tears here to come to a 5.08 budget. And I would not vote for a change tonight. I would abstain if there's any change to the budget. And I feel really strongly about that.
Dave, you looked like you were about to say something.
No, I'm trying to
Okay.
process all this because
Yeah.
my first thought was I thought on January 31st we had to turn in a budget.
We did.
And now
Yep.
and I just don't want us to, part of me wants us to revisit it, but part of me doesn't say every time we get a new piece of information,
Yeah.
are we going to be making a change?
Yes, and can I clarify that too? I apologize, but this information was less than 24 hours ago. Tom came over and shared the good news with me, which is the lower increase, right?
And this was unexpected. This was our insurance consultant who
Absolutely.
took this on.
She went
Herself.
and negotiated on our behalf and did a nice job. Like, kudos, Lynn, right,
Yeah.
for getting back there and you know, letting them know what a hardship this is creating for us, and she did it. Like, she landed us in a better place here. It was also within the 24 hours with the posted agenda, so you know, but it would be, you know, an option to add it as an old business item, warn it appropriately. And then one other just quick note, we have a Board of Selectmen member here. You know, this is a public meeting. This is now known by people, right? And we know what happened last year, right?
Yeah.
We kept it. It was reduced and through the process.
Yeah, I think to that point, and I think this is what you were saying too, and I'm agreeing with you, that we did our job with the information that we had, and we hit our deadline, which was January 31st. We submitted a budget with the best knowledge that we had. There's still multiple more steps in this process, and everyone will have the same information that we have as they move forward with it. So I think I'm in agreement with you, Dave. That it doesn't necessarily make sense to me to reopen our budget every time we get a new piece of information. The second thing that I wanted to say, and we're going to get into this with the next conversation, is that we have another piece of new information, which is that the number of outplaced students that we based our budget on when we voted on this a week ago, has changed. We have additional outplaced students now that are driving our deficit this year, and those students aren't factored into next year's budget. When we make our student services budget for the following year, we're operating with the limited knowledge that we have in that moment. And so, you know, when I look at that $70,000, I'm thinking, well, gosh, maybe that's the cushion that's going to cover this additional outplaced student that we didn't know about when we passed our budget last week. So I guess it's a reminder to me of what everyone is saying, is that there's constantly moving parts. This insurance number has shifted. Our needs have also shifted, even in the span of a week since we've passed our budget.
Yeah.
So I am inclined to say we did our job with the information that we had. Let's see what happens when our first selectman takes a look at it, when our Board of Selectmen take a look at it, and be prepared to answer their questions about why we put forward the budget we put forward.
I agree with that rationale.
Are there other thoughts, questions?
Whenever, if you can work those numbers, I'm just curious. No, I'm not expecting it tonight, just to be clear. No. I'm just imagining you have to get back to your computer. But I would just be interested
So
to
what Laurel's
understand that.
saying, you know, we got a reduction in insurance, but like you said, we have 3 new outplacements that weren't in this budget. So if we're going to start reducing based off of that, then why would we not increase based on the outplacements?
Yes.
So it can go either way. So that's just my.
It's such a fluid process.
It is fluid, and I think we really worked hard, and we kept in mind the taxpayers and families that are going to fund this educational budget. I think we did our due diligence, I think, when we start moving the numbers around in between, it's going to be confusing to the Board of Selectmen when we go to the workshops, but it's also confusing to parents, and it's also sending a message to teachers that we can't make up our mind. I think we have to stick with what we decided on. It was a good general consensus, and we all worked together hard to come to those numbers, and we're hoping we can restore positions, but that's not a promise I can make given the situation right now. So I think we should wait.
It might be a good segue to the next one.
Okay. Are there final thoughts or comments on this? We've got time, as we said. We can, folks can sit with this.
Well, we'd have to get it on the agenda for next meeting.
Yep.
We're going to do that. But
Yeah.
how?
Well, and between now and then,
Because I think it deserves a vote. I just want to say.
well, and between now and then, the decision might be made for us.
Meaning what?
I mean, if the
Well, if the Board of Selectmen.
Board of Selectmen or the first Selectmen say, we too, because it's all of our insurance premium, recognize the savings, we are taking it out of those line items. I would say, we have until March, right? I don't think we need right now, unless, there's a motion to amend the agenda and take action now, we can.
I don't think that can happen in the
think we-
middle of
I
our
think we
meeting. I
pass
think
that.
we are where we are.
No, we already. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we do try and pass anything tonight.
Yeah.
On this, but I just, feel strongly that we need to send the right message that we want to work together. We're not two opposite sides of the fence between the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, and we all recognize that there's tremendous needs. The need to be met, but again, we voted on a budget and we set what we have set, and I agree, we can't keep going back and forth every time there's a change. But to me, this is a very symbolic thing because it was a big issue last year, and it led to us voting for a budget that we knew exceeded what on paper we had already shown and we submitted that we needed, and now we've submitted the budget that we believed to be. And yet now it's a $76,000 windfall to the district of money that's not even been allocated to us yet.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's where I sit, because your original placeholder for healthcare costs was 10%. So 9.9 is as close to that as you can
Well,
get.
it was originally 12, I dropped it to 10,
Right.
and it went to 12.7, now
Right.
it's 9.9.
Right, but when we originally, it's semantics. I guess if I had to say anything, it would be that I would sooner have the close to 76,000 be the placeholder for support services because of our history, rather than kind of going back, because no matter what, those are mandated. Those are mandated services. So if you're going to say, take the 76 and use it here, there, or everywhere, and you're still going to have outplacements that we can't, then, I don't know. It goes back to the whole thing about putting money aside for capital and the track and all that kind of stuff. It's like, there's certain things you just have to plan for. So
I think I'm in agreement with you, Stacy, that in my mind, those funds are already spent. That $76,000 is, given what we know now about the additional outplacements that our district can anticipate for this coming year, those funds are already spent in our student services line item. So I don't see how.
yeah, I know.
I don't see how we could be using it for anything else.
Yeah, it is challenging to.
Well, our responsibility for special ed kids is $93,000, correct? And then reimbursement from the state at 76 cents on the dollar. So
This year's 70.
right there, times 3, that's $300,000 that's just been added to the budget. So I think we need to leave it alone, and hopefully when we get a chance to explain and we have a good conversation with the Board of Selectmen, and things may change by March 13th or, by, the time of the referendum. The budget is fluid. It's not in stone. And so we did our job, and I think let's hope we don't have anybody else moving into the district that has to be outplaced. We'll just keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's a shifting need for sure. I guess I'm curious, because this kind of flows into the next conversation, are we prepared to kind of keep things moving, and is everyone comfortable with that if we move along? All right.
All right, so for the next conversation, I just want to spend a minute, not even so much for the board, because I think we've been together enough, and you sort of understand, you listen to Dawn's reports, but this is for anybody watching, right? That the special education budget is incredibly complicated because we budget for what we think we're going to need, but that changes all the time. Shortly, Dawn's going to share with you what she budgeted for 12 months ago when she built this year's budget. And that number, I'm sure, is either 16 or 17 outplaced students. The winds could blow in our favor, and that number could go down if students moved out of district or we brought students back from outplacement into our programs. Or that number could go up if additional students move into district or additional needs emerge from current students. We can't control that, but when we identify those needs for outplacement because students need enhanced care or clinical support, we have to provide it. It's not something we can control. That's a function of the design of these things through the PPT process, particularly if students move in from out of district and are already outplaced. They're stay put. They stay in those outplacements, and the bill shifts from whatever district to us. That is what has happened to us this year. It is frustrating. I understand it's confusing. It involves excess cost and threshold and student needs and a lot of different variables that in some cases, if you don't have a lot of years of experience like Dawn in special education and Stephanie in budgeting and me in terms of chairing PPTs and designing these programs, it's very hard to understand. But because of these needs this year, we're in a hole. We are in a position of a $350,000 deficit. Now, we have done everything we can, I want to repeat that, for rob Peter to pay Paul. Paul being Dawn and the special education support services. We have implemented a freeze. We have done everything we can to rob Peter to pay Paul. But I can't rob Peter anymore. Unless we were at a point where, and I'm not suggesting we do this, so nobody freak out, cancel spring sports or cancel the musical or lay people off or furlough or start cutting into personnel or other things that would have a dramatic impact on our faculty, staff, and most importantly, our students. Right? We're at that point. That number right now, that deficit, as a function of what Dawn's going to report to you and Stephanie's going to fill you in on, is $350,000. That could change tomorrow. It certainly could change between now and the end of June. But we're at a point in the year where we really need to start communicating this with the Board of Selectmen and Ryan so that they're not surprised in June if we have a $350,000 hole in our budget. I want to tell them in February, not June, and do everything I can to explain what we've done, show everybody that we're keeping the hard freeze in place and working hard. And I hope that there is no deficit in June. But right now, it's clear to me, I think there is going to be a deficit. I don't think that number is going to be $350,000, but 2 new students can move in tomorrow, right? I think that if everything stays the same now and it continues to be a warm winter and we're not burning heating fuel and Stephanie's working with Bob to see where we can trim back, we're going to cut into that. But I am at a point now where I think it's fair and respectful to our first selectman and our Board of Selectmen to communicate that to them, to make them aware of what is happening. And that's the nexus of the letter I included for you tonight. It is informational. It doesn't require any board action. It requires a lot of awareness and understanding of what's happening, and certainly is going to segue and pivot into what Dawn and Stephanie are going to report to you tonight. So, this would be a letter from me, not from the board, to Ryan. It is informational. It is just letting the community know where we are, and shortly Dawn and Stephanie are going to explain how we got here and the efforts we're making now to rob Peter to pay Paul. Be happy to answer questions.
This is Stephanie's letter to us. If I understand correctly, it's $180,000 deficit is benefits and medical payments. And then you have purchase services, transportation, and tuition to private, and tuition to LE, which is cumulatively apparently adds up to $170,000.
And that's special ed.
What's that?
And that's special ed.
That's all. So
The 5, 6,
So
the
30030 and 51010 and 56003 are all in the special ed?
correct. What's driving the deficit? Purchase
And do you have
services.
individual amounts for those three? The transportation, the tuition?
So if you, I mean, again, now, but on this document, this is as of December, we're already in February 1st, unfortunately, so it's a little different. So, I mean, if you look, so transportation, as of December, we were a deficit of 145,522.59. That's all special ed, that's all outplacements, I can tell you that.
You're going a little faster than
Yeah,
mine.
I can't
What's the line item?
51010,
Yep,
so that deficit of 145,522.59,
yep.
that's all outplacements.
Right.
The 56001, 003, 56006, that's all outplacements. So I try to lump together in my note, just to not make it super long, what's all related to each other. And then purchase services technically isn't showing, it is showing deficit. So that's a mixture of substitutes and speech, OT, PT. Basically, that's what's left in purchase services that hasn't been spent yet. That's 30030. It's hard because it's all the accounts lumped together. So, like, I have a separate document that I use when I do my projections, and I have it, salaries and benefits are one section, and then I go down by department. And so it's different than object. So I'm trying to figure out how to explain it to you guys in an easy way, and that's why I lumped it together in the notes. But if there's any accounts you have any questions on, I can hopefully elaborate on them more, just because I brought my document that I work on when I do my projections to get a better idea, to help answer anything.
But this shows, if I use 56003 shows, if I'm reading this correctly, like almost $700,000 in
Correct.
deficit.
Right.
And that's where it is now. So how can the total deficit only be 350,000?
Because of all the savings and the holds that we have on all the other accounts.
So you're balanced, okay, so all the
So it's
other
offsets,
accounts
yeah.
are
That's
offset.
Plus-
Peter or Robin.
So that's,
Plus the open choice money we get, plus excess cost added in, plus Medicaid, plus Hartford reimbursement, plus sick grant reimbursement, and mental health reimbursement.
Right.
So like I said, it's a giant spreadsheet that I have that I work off of. But, so like right now, we have a savings of $75,000 in certified salaries due to staffing that hasn't been placed. We have $80,000 in the custodial line because of a retirement mid-year. So all those surpluses in each line will go help towards the $1.45 million deficit in student services.
why wouldn't those amounts decrease the benefits and medical payment?
It all goes into a big lump sum. I get a whole total of what we have left to spend. The full
It
deficit.
just seems that's the closest tie, but it's not.
No.
If it's
Because we have to, so.
personnel savings and it's,
So we have to go
benefits and medical.
specifically to so Hartford reimbursement, that goes to specific line items. Those go to all the paras for all the Hartford kids and their benefits.
do we have that one there?
No,
or
this
it
is my
separate? Oh.
private document that nobody has. Excess cost, so that's $666,000 that we're getting from the state. That will offset tuition, 56001, 56003, and transportation. So when you add up the student services deficit, you put in the 666, but then we still have to pay for the difference,
Right,
which then eats into the other surpluses that we have.
right.
So could I take the benefits, so like right now I'm showing a deficit of 83, but I have,
It's gonna balloon out somewhere else.
right, so I've got two benefits coming from grants, so there's 40,000 going towards that. So is it beneficial for me for you don't see this document, like I said, this is my
I'd
document.
rather not see this at all,
Well, you do
because this is worthless.
Yeah,
Because
Well, I don't agree.
well, she
with
doesn't
this,
mention the 350s, we talk about that verbally, then we say it's all special ed, and then first item is, we're gonna be 180,000 short on the medical premium, so I'm thinking, okay, that's half of the 350, 170 is the special ed. I can't tie any of the numbers together, to me, it's worthless.
Well, I think,
because our total deficit is $1.5 million. That's the deficit.
I didn't see a total on this page either.
I know, because it's not, we don't encumber, our enterprise system, our.
I'm just saying, we need to see some
number.
numbers rather than the verbiage that doesn't tie out to anything.
So that's
I just don't send this at all to me, I just can't get anything out of it.
I try to give as much information as I can because our system doesn't provide documents like other bigger districts do. So I'm doing it literally all on Excel. And if
Well,
there's
yeah,
a
I'd
different
love an Excel
process-
document to spell this all out in some kind of rational way.
That's just a lot of, it's just never been done before, so that's why I don't know if that's a process change or how that works. It's never been done that way before. And like I said, I'm open to suggestions or anything, but if you looked at this document I have here, you have no idea what this is either.
No, and,
In
I
fairness.
mean, the thing about the budget is that you're moving money from one place to another. You've got a freeze on, where you've got money that you know you can move, you move it.
I try to take
Again,
it as
it's
a whole,
fluid.
and
I don't think
Yeah,
it's
right.
a whole.
But this doesn't tell me there's a 350,000 deficit. That's verbalized here. There's no nothing in these two
That came
pages
in-
tells me there's a
That came in Charles's letter to us.
Right. It's in-
50,000.
Yeah.
Right, but
This
we
is-
wouldn't normally get a letter from Charles like that. But I agree with Dave on the notion that there should be numbers in here. If we're going to get a narrative, which I'm fine with, frankly, I think it's wonderful, because we used to get absolutely nothing. It was a blind run every time we talked about money.
And when our
But
ship
numbers,
comes in,
to see something that adds up to,
And in fairness, this is as of December. We weren't in a $350,000 deficit in December. We were only in $120,000. This has just been out here because I've been doing the budget all month in January, so I couldn't report on it. So now we're in February. We got 2 outplacements last week. You know what I mean? So it's ever changing. So as of December 31st, it was only $125,000 in fairness.
and Stephanie, I would just say, when our ship comes in, you should look for an accounting system that works better than Enterprise. I mean, Enterprise is terrible. I use it, and I'm sure it's the same.
It's just hard because you
Dinosaur
can't
that you
can't
can't.
encumber salaries and benefits, and it makes it very hard. Like I said, I do it all myself.
It's a mess.
And it changes all the time. I'll just give you a few other things that Stephanie's we're accounting for, but, again, this level of detail, we'd be here all night, right? Like, for example, our family consumer science teacher left and took another position. We hired a new family consumer science position, started a few weeks ago. There's a significant difference between the step and salary that person was at and the new person coming in. Tonight, you just heard a teacher has taken an early retirement. We just hired a new person there. Again, some savings there. Other considerations, I don't know for sure, but did those two people coming in take a single person, a two-person, or a family medical package or not, right? These are the incredible complications that go into every day of Stephanie's life, right? Oil bill, you see the gas stations, sometimes they're higher, sometimes they're lower. Just today, heat pump at Valley View blew up, $15,000. We needed to do an indoor air quality thing, $2,000. It's always there. Like, Stephanie is 24 hours, well, I think 24 hours a day she works, but at minimum 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, sitting in front of her computer, watching the POs come in and making these adjustments, right?
Yeah.
In this case, you likely see those things that we can control aren't in deficit. Dawn, I think, this might be a very helpful time for her to point to that, to show you what she budgeted for last year based on what we anticipated the needs would be and how those changed. And then back to Laurel's point, Dawn has budgeted for next year what we think we need, but this past week,
Already changed.
it's already changed, right? And that's why, Dave, I understand when you say I can't tie out the numbers. Neither can we. They're always changing. That's what makes this so incredibly complicated. And I don't imagine this is like anybody else's small business that you run. You have some good weeks where you sell a lot of services and products, and some when you don't. It's a moving target. I wish it was static. I wish we could say this is what it is, but
Well, I understand all that detail, and I appreciate that,
Yeah.
but don't, just tell me you're $350,000 short. Don't tell me any details.
Yeah.
Because you're managing the details, but you're feeling in her support, you're gonna be 350 short. I don't need to know the details.
and even that, I'm not betting. I'm saying that's what I project as of today. But the real important date is the end of June, when it's time to go to the auditors and we have to close out the books and open the new books, right? That's why we need this. I wanted to have this conversation so that we could start communicating with the Board of Selectmen and First Selectmen, because what's scary about this is we haven't been here before, right? All of the years I've been here, we've been talking about surpluses. Those days are over. Even last year we had a deficit, but we mitigated it with federal COVID money and IDEA funding, right? This is different for us, but I will tell you, it's not unique in the state of Connecticut. I would say a great many districts, are in far worse shape than we are. But, we need to communicate. We need to I need you to be aware of what's happened, how it's happened, and what the communication strategy is going forward.
I just want to say, I think I'm with Tim that I appreciate the narrative that you provide for us, and it sounds to me like there are a few things that would be helpful in here to help make this more useful, including, if possible, with the future narratives. Could you just include a synopsis of kind of where we're at with the projected deficit or projected, just projecting forward, where are we at? Yeah. Like sort of what you just explained to us. You said, look, the total right now, we're looking at a deficit of 1.7 million. Is that what you said? 1.7? We've offset it.
1.558.
Oh, okay.
We've offset it by making X, Y, and Z changes.
And then all of our grant funding.
Right, and with all of our grant funding, and with that in mind, at this point in time, as of December 31st, we're projecting forward X amount of deficit. Is that the kind of, would that kind of make this feel
More sense, yeah.
a little more, like,
It's
a more summary?
often the revenue piece that is behind the scenes that we don't have as much purview to, which kind of completes the narrative of
Well, if I
here's the
sat there and said
deficit.
$1.55 million, people
Right.
would freak out.
But I think,
But it's
which is
offset by all
true.
the revenue.
And I think bringing the revenue into the conversation more, I think would help me to get to that, like, to connect the dots.
I can do that.
Yeah, and the other piece too, and Stephanie Dawn can comment on this, the reason why, even though that's the December one, we're comfortable February 7th saying this because we just got the first excess cost payment. And we know what it is, right? Which is the higher threshold and the lower amount, right? So we know now, right? And that's what we were saying right along. It couldn't be this bad if we'd gotten the historical 84% reimbursement, we'd be in a very different place, but
With the cap of, what was it originally anticipated to be, 84, 86,000?
No, our tier was, we would have gotten 70, it's still only 76.42 or whatever it
But
is.
on the capped amount of 88,000. So did you all follow that the state this year not only raised our capped amount, the threshold, that's what I was looking for. They raised the threshold and they lowered the rate of reimbursement. So that's part of this as well.
But everybody got that, everybody got the lower.
Right.
which is why everybody's in this unfortunate position in the state. And I'm telling you, many of my colleagues, superintendents, our hair is on fire with the state. I mean, I've shared with you the CAPS and the key lobbying efforts that adjustment sunk us because they made it after we'd already adopted the budgets.
And they tried to take credit for it and made it sound like it was a big deal, and it wasn't.
And in fairness to the threshold piece, the state doesn't raise it just to raise it. It goes off of our net cost per pupil. So if it's costing us more to run the schools and per student, that's what drives that. So our net cost per pupil went up to $20,000 this year. When I first started, it was only 17. So that's a good thing because we're giving a better education, we're giving a good education to students. But a lot of it too is the COVID money because it takes into consideration all the federal grants. So that could potentially next year come down because as the federal funding money goes away, that could go down and then it could reduce the threshold. But that's always based off of what we're supposed to spend per year per student times the 3.5. So depending if that goes up or down, that's based off of our end of year numbers. It's not something like that the state chooses to increase. It's just we're spending more per student.
When I started, it was 14 something
Was it?
on this board per student.
Which is a reflection on
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's a reflection on the costs of providing services to our
Yeah.
students with
And special
needs
needs
that we
increases.
can't meet in district. That is the figure that is really driving this.
Is that true that the outplacement costs are averaged into the per pupil expense, or are the outplacement costs separate from the
Everything
calculation
goes
of
in.
them per pupil?
Federal dollars, any expense we pay for outplacements, it's all included in that.
And then
And does
averaged?
it get netted out
Okay.
based on our reimbursement?
So, no, it's a calculation, it's that big EFS state report that I have to do, and it does some magical thing behind the scenes and takes all the information I put in, and it breaks it down by school, how much we pay, district-wide, how much we pay, and then in total include, they'll break it out, just LEA, portion, and then they add in the federal dollars and everything that we receive and state to get the total. That's why where we say our budget is $23,547,000, but when we look at the EFS, it'll be like $26 million because it adds in all the other pieces that we spend. And all those, you can find all that online, what every district spends and what we're supposed to put on the website, so technically I have to get that to Holly to get on the website. But it's usually available to everybody. I don't know if anybody has any questions on, it's the typical quarterly, it's more obviously the deficit, if anybody has any questions on than anything. And I'm basing my projections, obviously benefits and salaries, those are fixed. I can't, unless somebody leaves and doesn't take benefits anymore. Those are the, on my document, like the above line ones, those are ones I can't control. The ones below, and I don't even give people many dollars left. The most spending that'll be left for the rest of the year will be athletics, gas and diesel, spring, ground stuff for the spring, all the seed and fertilizer and everything that they need to do the fields, and then facilities. And I only gave Bob about $30,000 to get through the end of the year. And that's, and I keep cutting into it as we get other expenses and other things, because everything else is fixed. And graduation. And so the high school has about $20,000 left that I'm allowing them to have for graduation. And even my subline, the subline, I'm nervous about that one, that I'm not projecting enough there. Weekly when the bills come in, I try to see okay, we're going to be this far in or this far out, and it's hard because you don't know who's going to be out. And towards the end of the year, people start taking and using their time, and that's when it always ends up increasing.
The subline.
The substitutes.
Yep.
We're doing pretty good right now, but from what we've spent the first 6 months, if I took that exact dollar amount to the last 6 months, I'm projecting, it's more, you know what I mean? So I try to do the best that I can, and like I said, I change it weekly between the different line items and where I see, I try to close out as many POs as I can, combine things where I can. I'm still trying to work with transportation on combining some things.
You're doing a great job, Stephanie. Thank you.
She is.
Yeah, and I really am, I think it's important that you've drafted this letter, Charles, and that we're communicating this. I know you've already met with Ryan and with Tom to discuss this, but I think it's important that this be communicated to Ryan and the Board of Selectmen, because as you said, this is a slightly different position than we've been in past years. So better to be talking about it now and planning for it now than to find ourselves in June talking about it for the first time.
And remember, in November, it was $350,000, and then it dropped down to $125 because somebody left. So, next week we could get some good news. Yep. I just don't know now at this point. It's making me,
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Stephanie or Charles about the financial report, about the letter that Charles has drafted? We kind of blended the superintendent's report into the financial report. But I think
Makes a perfect blend for Dawn if you're ready for her.
Yeah. No. All right. Let's bring up Dawn. Stephanie, thank you.
And I'll look for, because that's only a quarterly that I send that memo out. So for the next quarter, I'll try to incorporate something with numbers.
Okay. Thank you.
The documents attached to my report are just for the last bullet point, which is some documents some good news I wanted to share with you. I'm just going to give you a bunch of but the meat of my report is just the front page. So one of the important things we wanted to talk about today was our census and where we're going, especially when we think about our students that are outplaced, because that's been a steady drive since the end of last school year. So I'll jump right down to that. That's the second bullet there. We currently have 24 students that are outplaced. It's the highest number it's been in many years. I wanted to take, and the issue is that we only budgeted for 17 for this year's budget. So there's that issue, and then Stephanie's spoken about what's going on with excess cost reimbursement, because that's a big piece of how we fund a lot of our students' outplacement needs, transportation, tuition, related services that go along with their outplacement. When the school year ended last year, we had 16, so we even went, we had a nice little, we went down for what we had budgeted for in the fall, which is not always the case. So we were in an okay place. And then we had, over the summer, we had 2 more move into the district unexpectedly. We didn't even know they existed. In addition to that, we had a student that had been outplaced, came back, spent a year back in one of our special programs, and then we had to place out again into a therapeutic setting. So we've had a lot of work that's gone on from July 1 till now. I do want to take just a moment to speak about how do we get to the point of an outplacement. You guys know me long enough, I hope you realize that when we have to make an outplacement, to me it's admitting some defeat in some way. It's after usually years of work with that student, his or her family, all of the things that come into play for us to throw up our hands and say, okay, we don't have the capability to care for this child here, we have to send them to another program. Sometimes it's medical, sometimes it's significant developmental needs, communication and motor and all of that into a tidy package. Sometimes it's behavioral. I feel since COVID it's been much more of an impact from our behavioral, socially emotional dysregulation needs that have gone on. On the school side, on the district side, sometimes it's environmental. We didn't have a place to put somebody that needed more space or more private areas and things like that. That's been a lot of my work over the last 7 years, is to make sure that we have programs like that. We have programs at each of the buildings to address both cognitive and learning difficulties, as well as social emotional difficulties, motor support, language support, all of that. We're really comprehensive. You guys as a Board of Ed should be proud of what you've committed to get that done. But there's times when we reach that point with a child where we cannot program for them here. And sometimes we even have a child go out to outplacement, come back, but realize that they still need they need that higher level of care, despite everybody's best wishes. But I just want you guys as a board to realize, it's easy to say, we'll just cut some of those outplacements out. But that's not our answer, because we didn't get to that answer easily to begin with. Nobody woke up and said, I want Johnny Smith to go out, he's just been a bee in my bonnet, we're going to send him out to another school. It's never taken at that level. There's always a lot of work that goes into deciding to an outplacement. And for example, the 2 that just came up over since the beginning of the new calendar year were both ones that we have worked with these families and these children for at least 3 years, trying to keep them doing everything we possibly can. We went as most restrictive and most supportive as possible in the school setting, and now have reached a point where we have to offer them programming in another setting. So I just want to give that idea. And then I also want to update, because I know we had a big discussion as we were working on the budget for next year. We were talking about transportation, how expensive transportation has gotten. And I will tell you, I'll give you a little description of Olivia on Friday. We have one of our new outplacements. We had transportation all set up. We held the PPT a couple weeks ago, had transportation all set up. This person was going to start in their new program yesterday morning, Monday morning. On Wednesday, she gets a phone call from the agency, from the transportation company that was going to do her transportation. We had it all set. He was in a ride share. Everything was great. They said, we can't take him. We lost a driver. We have to cut this run. Olivia spent all of Thursday and Friday. She called everybody but Adam to see who she could get to transport. It finally worked out that we're able to work with a transportation company that usually deals with the town where the student is going to school, doesn't come to Portland usually, but at an 11th hour said to us, okay, fine, we'll do it, but it's only because your student is in the town that we support. It's not even an agency that usually works with us. And I had to put his first day's ride on my credit card just because we didn't have any time. We're out of time. Now, this wasn't because somebody didn't do their job. It wasn't because somebody didn't know what they were doing. And on Olivia's part, it definitely wasn't a matter of not putting energy into it. This was a last minute, oh my gosh, and we're still at that point with transportation around the state. It's much better than it was 3 years ago when we come back from COVID, but it's not fixed yet. It's still very, very tight. So we do, just to give you guys an idea, we do ride shares when possible, we contract with agencies, we get prices, multiple prices when possible to be able to pick the best choice. We alternate between, sometimes we have students that really need support even on their bus ride because they need a para with them or they need a nurse with them and things like that, so we work all of that out. Nothing is done lightly. It's not like we just check off the box and say, call so-and-so and have them send a bus. It's very, very carefully bartered out, every piece of that. So, and just like it will be for, leading into next year as we get transportation contracts in place for the summer and for next year. But it still puts us in a reality of the fact that we have 24 students that are outplaced right now. The last 2 will begin their new positions this month. Now, it's not all gloom and doom. I mean, Stephanie's numbers are tough, and it's really, we have to be proactive and do what Charles is doing. But at the same time, we have students that are moving. We have students that are changing their guardianship. Their guardianship is changing, so their nexus may change. We have lots of things, lots of irons in the fire. We have lots of projections around that, but we can't count on that because a child might be in an adoptive process and their new guardian is getting ready to adopt them, but something falls through and that child is still in our nexus. Our job is to educate that child with whatever their needs are. So we do, and Stephanie and I work carefully to make sure that she has the updated information, but the reality is that these things are changing minute by minute. I could come back to you with my next report and have really good news because there's been some changes. But I'm not going to tell you to hold your breath and keep our deficit a secret. We need to be public about it, like Dr. Britton has done. Any questions about the outplacement status?
Can you remind us what the pending category is in your report?
Oh, pending is students that have been referred for special education, but there's a process of what we call PPT1 and PPT2. When a student's been referred to education, we hold that first PPT, we schedule, we plan testing, parents give consent, and we have about 45 days from the start of the process till the end. So those 9 students that are pending, now they may not all become special ed students. They may stay in their tiered supports, or they may have a 504 plan that's developed, but they will not, there's no guarantee that they're all going to be special ed. I just keep that number on there because it's an important number for me to be monitoring. I am really excited to see that we have been level for the last 3 months since November. Our numbers have not gone up. And I mean, our numbers, we've had kids that have left special education or have graduated out, been exited, but we've had new ones come in. But to stay at 281 and not go up is pretty exciting because usually this time of year we're making a climb to add more students. And remember, I've been speaking about that we really hit a high top coming out of COVID. There was so much learning loss and socially emotional dysregulation that our numbers went way up. But I anticipate we're going to continue to see a downtrend.
So it looks like our total number of IEPs stayed flat, but there was quite a jump in 504s. And I'm curious about that. Is that what's going on there?
So there's a couple things going on. I think part of it is bookkeeping because I think what happened was the CT SED system that we use, that everybody in the state uses, is really tight on all of their compliance and bookkeeping for the IEPs, for the special ed students. But the 504s, it's harder to track. So we really did a deep dive this week and looked at we looked at Power School, CT SEDs, and did a good deep dive. I think it was some students that we added on. I don't think these are students that, we just had a big jump in the month's time. Okay. I think there were students that were slipping through on. Remember that the IEPs and the special education law is protected heavily by IDEA, and there's really strict hoops we have to jump through for every single piece, and every piece of that data is monitored. But for 504 plans, it's a little more loosey-goosey. So I think that's part of it.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions about my chart on top? I do, I note that we are down by one student in the special programs, and just remember that our new outplacements are kids that were already in special programs. They were in either Harbor or Bridge or something like that. They were in one of the social emotional support programs. But those numbers are staying pretty steady.
Paul, can you maybe just talk about that a little bit? That 65 students in special programs, if we didn't have those special programs, what would that do to our outplacement numbers, and what would the cost of that be?
Well, remember, that's why we built the transition program this year, because every student that's in the transition program requires and qualifies for transition services. So if we didn't have something here, we'd be sending them to places like our neighbors across the river that have, Region 13. They have an on-site program at Wesleyan University. That's a transition program. It's like sending a student in a special ed program to another district. That's exactly what it is, and it's costly. So by building our program that we have here, we're able to do that. The other piece is we're able to have kids that need a really small self-contained setting, provide them with that setting, and not have to send them out, because some kids are in this setting their entire day. They're not in their mainstream classes at all, but they go to lunch and recess with their peers. We have some kids that spend half a day in their special program and then spend half a day in their home school, so they still get to, be in their own classroom, their gen ed classroom for things like morning meeting, lunch, recess, and maybe an academic period, or maybe go to specials, and then they're getting the support that they need. So yeah, everything that we've built has been built because we had a problem or a lack of service. We had to build that up. I will say there's a couple of students that we had to place early on in my career here, and it was the impetus for why we built these programs, because these students had such a major need as far as programming, and there was no way to provide that, whether it was at Valley View or Gildersleeve. There wasn't the staffing or the room or the structure to provide that. And the shame is we had to send them to another district. And to me, it's such a rejection to have to send children to another district, because a neighboring community had those programs in place already. And then now these children have been in these other districts for years, and they're part of that community. So to bring them, to take them out of that and make them come back here would be a disruption in their lives, because they're doing well in the programming that they have. That's why we had to build the programming here, to prevent that from continuing to happen. Any other questions on that part? All right. So I spoke about outplacement. These next two things are data points and information just about where we stand as a district in pupil services. The third point down is disproportionality, our disproportionality report. This is where the Bureau of Special Education looks at our identification rates and ratios for students in all of the subgroups. So whether it's a racial or an ethnic subgroup, they look at the number of students in those groups that are identified under each of the special ed categories, whether it's learning disabled or autism or what we call other health impaired, OHI. They look at those numbers and then they compare it to the rest of our population. So last year I shared with you that we were cited for what we call a high risk index, and that's anything over a 3.0. We had a high risk index of Black or African American students identified as learning disabled. So the question that comes out of that is, what are we doing to make sure we don't have to identify kids as learning disabled? What are the steps? What do we do to make sure that it's really not just an issue of race or experience or language or ethnicity, that it's really a true learning disability? How do we flesh that out? And so we had to do a self-study of what we do, and it really comes down to our survey program. What do we do with pre-referral strategies? And we did a nice self-assessment that was required by the state, looked at everything that we had to do. There was really no areas of deficit. And so and last year our risk index was 3.79. This year it came down to 3.15. So it's still above the 3.0, but we're trending downwards. And that's what the state wants to see. They want to see that you acknowledge it and you fix anything or you rectify any issues that are existing in your systems.
In your self-assessment, it sounds, were there things that you identified that could be done differently that you think drove the decrease in the identification rate?
The only place that we saw is where we're weak, and this is no surprise, is we have a weakness in support services for middle school and high school. If you walk into Gildersleeve, this is why they went from being a school, a school of low performance to, a high performing district or high performing school in the district, is they really targeted. They've got reading specialists, math specialists, and all of that. We don't have that as strongly at the secondary level. Really, one of the biggest indicators for a child struggling with their studies at the secondary level are grades. So that's a little bit different. It's hard to remediate with grades. So I know every year when we build our budgets, Mr. Hirschon is advocating for a full-time math specialist, reading specialist that can support both the middle school and high school and things like that. So that was the only area that we really came up with as far as a deficit.
And would you say that that was addressed in some way and drove the decrease, or it just merely was an area of deficit?
I think we're tightening up our survey practice at the secondary level. Really, Ms. Lawson's done a nice job and Mr. Hirschon's done a nice job with their schools, making sure that we have a group of qualified personnel that are looking at those students that are failing and trying to get to the root cause and rectifying it that way.
Okay, thanks.
The second area that we were identified this year for the first time, and that is our identification of students with autism that are also identified as Hispanic. And I will tell you, we're talking about 12 students across the whole district, and this one's a tougher one because, again, we did the self-assessment this year. There's no areas of deficit or need that we could find, according to what is a good pre-referral strategy for students with autism. But autism identification is so different. It's not typically done, a learning disability identification is typically done by a school psychologist and a special ed teacher and maybe speech and language if it's, if there's some phonemic issues going on, but it's done by the people here in the building. When it comes to autism identification, we really rely on the outside medical and psychological community. Quite often, parents come in with a medical diagnosis of autism. They've been working, typically autism traits are really coming out about the age of 2. So parents might have gone through birth to 3, they've gone through their pediatrician, so they have that medical diagnosis. And it's never for us as a district to refute that unless it really, it shows up differently in the child's academic needs. So that was one issue that we struggled with. And then the other piece is when we have a student that we need those questions answered on and they don't come with a medical diagnosis, we do wind up using the outside community. We will refer to a neuropsychologist so that they look at the whole child and their neurodiversity. And that's where a lot of our autism diagnoses come from. Almost all of them come from. So that's a harder one to figure out what's going on. I would be more worried if we just did diagnoses in district and we only tested in English. Because now we have a community of students that may be English language learners, but that's not the case. Most of our students have been evaluated. Either English is considered their first language, or they are, we've done some bilingual evaluations. So that's it's going to be a tough one to watch. My hope is that it comes down, but that's going to be an area that we're going to have to watch and continue to work with. The other piece is quite often an autism diagnosis doesn't go away. It's, children learn coping mechanisms and they learn skills and strategies, but that autism diagnosis will stay with them for, I think, much longer than a learning disability can stay with them.
Dawn, if I think about what's within our control, you mentioned the multilingual assessments. I don't know if there are neuropsychologists out there that are using culturally responsive mechanisms. I mean, I don't even know if an autism, if the evaluations used have, there are even those standards in place right now. But is that something that we as a district could consider to look at whether there are neuropsychologists that are using that culturally responsive lens in their identification practices?
Yeah, I mean, it's always something we can continue to look at, by all means. I mean, that's not this isn't a done deal. I'm just updating everybody where we are right now. But you're right, because the tools that they're using are, how are they as far as being culturally responsive? Most of the tests that they use, we're all familiar with, but the results that they use also can be based upon their observation, but it can also be based upon the evaluations done by bilingual evaluators and impressions coming from there as well. So, yeah, it's gonna be a tougher one, because it's pretty cut and dried how we evaluate them. And usually when somebody's coming up with an autistic diagnosis, there's some significant impact in order to have that diagnosis. So what does this mean for Portland? What this means is, we have IDEA funding. We get a grant it's a 2-year cycle, but we get a grant from IDEA. And we basically can spend it on what we need in the district to support student services. But if we continue over a 3-year span to have either of these indicators stay at a high risk and not be trending downward, we could be mandated by the state and federal grant writing process to have to take part of those funds and put it towards early intervention services. So things like it could be something that, it's what they mandate to us is a percentage of the grant, and I think it's 15% of the grant. But what we use it for just has to be early intervention services. So I think in terms of, could that be something, if we have to do that in the future, could that be where we have to allocate the funds? So maybe we allocate them towards a reading specialist or math specialist or a Serbi interventionist, things like that. But that's what it means right now for the district. And, of course, we want to be culturally responsive to all of our students' needs. That's our bottom line. But I just wanted to bring you guys up to speed on what that meant, just because it is part of our annual data collection. Any questions on that? All right, and if you think of questions, I'll be back next month. You know where to find me. The last one is, this is the data that I gave you, the artifacts that I gave you. Speaking of 11th hour, on Friday we received a letter, Dr. Britton received a letter from the Special Ed Division Director, Brian Klimkowitz, and it was just telling us that we have met our met requirements for our Special Ed annual performance report. And I go over this with you every year, but it's like everything, and we only do once a year. I just like to bring it to your attention again and supply you with some materials. So the first one came on Friday. It was just a letter that said it meets requirements, and they would release the documents on Monday. So yesterday they released our report. So what the next 2 pages are the district determination process. It's just an answer. Set of information about what the different determinations are and how they're made. And then the last 2 pages are our state performance plan, or our annual performance report. So again, it says, right on the top that we meet requirements. Now, we don't have to pass every single one and meet the target. There's key ones that are indicators that we have to meet with success on, and it's indicated right below. 4B, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And then some other key areas, general supervision, timely and accurate reporting. These are all the things that keep me up at night to make sure that we're getting IEPs done on time, that we make, when we have a referral, we make that, we get the student identified or found not eligible within the 45 days, all of those pieces. So I'm going to leave this with you. I don't expect you to digest it and really have a lot of questions on it tonight. I just received it yesterday. So I just wanted to give it to you just so you had it, and we can talk about it when I'm back next month, unless you have questions right now.
I just have one question. Since you probably looked at this when you got it, are there any things in like the 1 to 3 page report that kind of jumped out at you? And congratulations on meeting the requirements.
Not me. There's a lot of people that go behind getting us to meet requirements. No, I am happy with our early childhood outcomes. That's on the top of page 2. Those are in a good place. A lot of our data, they're not reporting out exact amounts because our population's so small and it makes information identifiable. No, I mean, the chronic absenteeism is one that, I mean, I'll take that to retirement with me. That's such a hard blow because there's so many people in this district that work so hard to make sure kids get here every day. But when we have kids that are missing more than 20 days of school a year, I mean, that's got an impact. You guys know if you miss a day of work, you come back and you've got to get caught up and you're motivated to be there and you're gung-ho to get done what has to get done. But imagine for that child that's struggling already, if they're missing too much school, that's a tough one. So,
Is it illness that keeps them out of school? I mean, have we analyzed what the absentee rate is caused by? Just not getting transported or
it's a variety of factors. I don't think it's getting transported because we do crazy stuff to get kids to school. I mean, short of going and picking them up in our cars, we do a lot of crazy stuff. And we're still planning some more crazy stuff like Charles and I are talking about, you know, going back to doing more of the transportation in district versus farming it out to contracting it out. So we'll, you know, if that means that we've got that van that can go pick that child up when they're, you know, they miss the bus and mom says, oh, they're going to stay home, and we call and we say, nope, we got the van, we're going to come pick you up. Those were some of the niceties that we had about having our own two little school buses. So that, I mean, so to answer your question about what caught me by, everything looks really good, but our chronic absenteeism is still, you know, it's making progress, but it's 20% hard. That's a lot.
And would IDA funds work to that benefit to get kids to school if it's not?
If they have a special ed need, yeah.
So maybe we should look at that. The other thing I'll say is that IDA was promised to be a 40% funding for each child. It's funded at currently 13%, which is disgusting. This is a 35-year-old law that was passed. And when I was at the conference on Sunday and Monday, there was a telephone number to text to, and I've heard from 2 congressmen. They're well aware of it. There is a bill in the House right now, Chris Van Holland and another representative from California. They would fund it over a 10-year period with mandated amounts every year to the point of 40%. But parents have to, and communities have to get on the phone and start to demand that this be funded fully. I mean, the promise was 35 years ago, and it was, you know, going to be the miracle money that was going to help kids who didn't have services before, who didn't even come into the schools.
Right.
So I think we should really.
I know it's a false celebration when we celebrate the anniversary of IDEA law, and because the reality is the rules have been there, but they're not funded.
They're not
funded. So we're not getting the full effect.
We can do more to advocate for that.
I'm looking, and the board talked about this a little bit with Eric in our board retreat when we were looking at district data, but looking at these chronic absenteeism numbers and reminding myself that this is data that goes back to 2021-22 school year. Our kids started the school year wearing masks. Yeah, I mean, that was still, we were still in the thick of COVID. We were telling kids, if you aren't feeling well, if you have a sniffle, stay home. Let's not spread this, right? So in a lot of ways, in my mind, those numbers reflect what was happening in our larger student body, in our practices in the district and across the state and across the country. So it'll be curious to see what happens to those numbers over the next.
Because the hope is, again, the chronic absenteeism continues to trend down.
Right.
Because it is down, you know.
I'm just not surprised that it's to see it that high in that year in particular. As unfortunate as it is.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Dawn. All right. We're going to move on to new business. The first item under new business is the open choice seats from 2024-25.
Okay, so we do need to get this into the state to declare our seats for next year. I think that these charts are always a little bit difficult to follow. The best one to look at is on page 3 of 4, where you actually see the new seats, right? So the first chart there is our current seats, right? And where, you can sort of see the carryover, whereas, from kindergarten, we currently have 2 students, we're projecting those 2 will continue with us in the first grade. You see how you have to follow it sideways. Whereas after, our 4 students graduate, we will be at 58 students, right? As a reminder, the number for us that we're going to try to reach is 65. Stephanie has included a placeholder of 65 open choice students. We always try to stay at that, a little above the 5% of our total student enrollment, because then we get the escalation, and that's the number we've sort of committed to. So, 65 minus 58, gets us to 7, right? So I did include those 7 seats for kindergarten, right? But then you'll notice I included a couple of extra seats for 2nd grade and 4th grade. Those reflect where I think we can absorb those students and keep our class sizes in the right place. But you'll notice 1st grade is a hard 0 there, and you know why we're at that, because we have 6 sections of kindergarten with 88 students. We're projecting 5 for next year. 90 is that number in kindergarten, that once we go past 90, we look to add the 6th section. So, we need to keep those 2 seats for potential folks that become Portland residents. So I wasn't comfortable adding any seats there. I mean, it's one of those things that, it would be tough if Open Choice sent us, 3 students at $30,000, and that put us to a place where we needed to hire another teacher, which is generally a master's, step 5 plus a benefit package, which would be well more than that. So it's almost like, Open Choice, if you can guarantee us 7 students, we can open the seats, but you can't guarantee us less than 7 students, or it contributes to the budget difficulty. So that's why that's hard there. Although, our preference is always starting students in kindergarten and 1st grade. So I kind of made up that difference at 2nd grade and 3rd grade. So we would be adding a total of 10 seats, of which we need to fill 7 in order for us to achieve the goal of 65 as the budget placeholder and keep us at that 5% of our total student enrollment. That was a lot of numbers I just threw at you. I hope you followed all that. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions.
And this projection of, opening up to 68 seats, hoping to get to 65, this is consistent with what we've had in place, the numbers we've had in place over the last several years. So this isn't a change from practice.
I think we've had 70 at times.
Yeah, we're up to 70 at one point, and then down.
Post-COVID, the number came down a little bit. Yeah.
So I would need this to be approved so we can get it in on time to our friends at the state.
Charles, I have, I guess, a curiosity question, as this is only my 2nd year with this process. Last year, you shared with us a letter from the Chief Strategic Planning Officer, and it had some different funding mechanisms, early beginnings grant. Was that just for last year, or does that happen each year?
Special grants. In addition to that, we get the bonuses.
So,
That's what
yeah,
5%,
so
yeah.
any child in kindergarten, we get an additional $4,500 per kindergartner. And then, I forget what the dollar amount is, but if you lump a certain number of kids that are in the same class, you get an extra bonus on that, but those are like surprises at the end, and I'm like, oh, hey, we got extra money. Because I don't know, class-wise. Kindergartens I can tell. But like the bonus ones, I won't know until the end.
I didn't know if that was just
But
a
yes, no, that
special
happens
thing
every
last
year.
year, or that's every year.
Yeah, that's why we try to stay at 5%, because as soon as we're above 5%, we're eligible for more of the bonus.
I think I had sent this in a question to you, and you had responded in an email, but I continue to be concerned that we're looking to add 7 kindergarten seats, and what that impact might be in terms of another section of kindergarten. I think it's a reasonable concern. We don't really know what's going to happen. I know that there's some thought that we might see less students register because of the age difference, but we also already acknowledge that we're not really going to work really hard to keep those kids from starting. It would be an assessment, and unless there's an egregious issue that we're going to work with students who are presenting to us. So that's just one concern I have with that. And the other one, and I know I sent a follow-up question, and you put on here about the 7 kindergartens, 2 second grade, 1 fourth grade, and then the ability to add 2 siblings. And it may have been the way I structured the question, you didn't get it, but you didn't answer that part. So you're saying 68 seats, but is that actually 70 if the sibling group is invoked and people want to come because they have a sibling here?
Right, so we're declaring, yes, I think the way I would answer that is we're declaring the 10. If siblings came, so it could be part of the 10, but they would give us the flexibility to go more.
Right, so really we'd be approving up to 70
Correct.
students.
Correct.
I just think that would be more appropriate to
Yeah,
clarify
and
that. Because we're not declaring 68 seats, we're declaring 70.
That's fair, with the 2 being siblings. And I
Doesn't mean they'll all come.
Yeah,
I
it's not-
understand that, but that's...
correct. That's fair. Yeah, that's fair, Ken.
And that is how you worded a potential motion for us, with the ability to add up to 2 sibling requests.
Correct.
But I just think it's ambiguous. It doesn't, I don't know if we're trying to soften the number from,
I don't think it's softening it, it's just that because those 68 seats are laid out really clearly where they are grade level wise, and the two potential sibling seats aren't a specific grade,
Right.
I think that's why it's separated out that way. It's not about softening the
I mean,
seats.
because the sibling could come in in 9th grade.
Well, I completely, but there's 2, you could add, you could put 1 word in and a different word in, and it would make it clear, and it would make it, so you're really declaring up to 70 with only the possibility of two sibling seats. But anyway,
Tim, I think this language is pretty similar to what we considered last year.
wow, you have a great memory.
So I guess my follow-on question is, what has been the pattern over the years on those sibling seats?
None.
Okay.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
She's not.
It's, they ask us to consider it in
Correct.
case it is something that is desired,
That's
but
exactly
it seems like
Okay.
we offer it and it's not
That's right.
usually taken. Are there any other questions? Does everyone feel clear on what the request is?
And I did share them. I think you got them up there.
Yeah. Okay. Is someone willing to make a motion?
I don't have it in front of me, I'll make a
Here,
motion.
I have language here, in case we use it.
I'll make a motion to recommend that the Portland Board of Education declare up to 68 seats to include 7 kindergarten seats, 2 second grade seats, and a 4th grade seat for the open choice program, with the ability to add 2 sibling requests during the 24-25 school year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Kim. Any further discussion?
I'll just say, I think an accurate motion would be 70 seats, but that's, I'm not going to belabor that point. But it's enough for me to vote no on it. I would prefer not to, but it's...
Okay, so we're gonna have to help me with the proper procedure here. Would you like to amend the motion to?
I'm not requesting that.
Okay, because you can if you want to.
Right, it just feels like it belabors the whole
Okay.
thing, and it's, again, I just think accuracy would be, and if you, that's why I sent the question. I think there just wasn't enough time before the meeting to get to that piece, but.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Tim? Any abstentions? No. All right, motion passes 6-1. All right. I've lost my agenda. Here we are. We're going to move on to the post-budget recap.
So we added this, I think it was Sarah, had maybe had some suggestions for how we might do things differently next year in terms of when you're provided information, how much you're provided, the timeline. So what we included in your budget came right from the handbook that Stephanie gives to the administrators. So you'll notice that, as we know, we have the January 31st deadline. Like that's in the town charter. That's when we need to have a budget that transitions from superintendents to Board of Education, and then Board of Education transmitted to the First Selectman and the Board of Selectmen. So that process begins back on October 20th. It takes time, right? I mean, it's a lot of work with us, particularly Dawn, figuring out projections and all of that. So I did share both the timetable with you, but I'm all ears. If there's more or different types or other ways that we can help make sure you have all of the information in an accurate, timely, and transparent way. Stephanie and I are here. We'd be happy to take notes and, always in search of improvements. So otherwise, if you felt like things went well, understanding that it was a very complicated year, I understand that. I saw the angst. I knew it was coming. It wasn't a fun fall. I couldn't think of any way to make it, spoonful of sherry. But I'm happy if there are other ways that people feel like we could do it. I'm all ears.
Does this warrant a maybe possible retreat type event where we could not only maybe talk about the budget, but just how the finance is rolled out, since we don't have a finance committee and we're responsible, that we maybe want to tailor it a little bit differently for the everybody's needs?
I think a retreat to talk about finance and particularly about our budget timetable and process is a great idea. It's something that has been on my mind too, that thinking that, that might be an ideal opportunity to talk about process and, yes, I agree.
Well, I think one of the things I heard us talk about during that budget process was that we would be considering having a budget or finance committee, that we would actually make that.
Well, I'm shaking my head.
I'm just saying what I heard.
I'm sorry, Tim.
I'm
I
not saying
didn't
you
need to
did.
do that. Yeah.
But I believed there was some notion that might not, it might finally be the time to do what virtually every other Board of Education in the state does, and have a budget or finance committee in addition to any other committee that's appropriate. So that's where my head goes. I mean, this is great, but at the same time, what's that?
I think it's a great retreat topic.
Right,
I
would like to see that on, if we're going to do a retreat, that discussion be part of that. It doesn't mean we know or predetermine an outcome, but if it's not on there as a possibility, then it won't be discussed.
Laurel and I had gone to a workshop, and we had taken some ideas away. We've never been able to implement them, but we'd be happy to share those in a retreat as well.
Yeah.
What bothered me this year, and I know this was a heck of a process, is the gap between like November, December, and then January. We got it, and then it was the gallop to the finish to get this thing done by the end of the month. And so I think, a retreat when we can talk about some other ways to inform the board as we go along. I like the committee as a whole, as a finance committee. I always feel like sometimes when the subcommittees meet and, we're not all on personnel, we're not on curriculum, building and grounds is still, I think, a kind of ad hoc committee that meets whenever we have the need. Sometimes I feel like I've missed some information, so I like the committee as a whole to be working together, but I think a retreat is perfect, Dave. Thank you for that suggestion.
At the risk of inflating this retreat, I do see a theme, and maybe it's two retreats, I don't know, but I do see a theme between, I think there was a general sense that we got the budget and it was like all the pieces were already in place and this was your proposed budget, and we hadn't been involved earlier to get any sense of what direction it was going. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that there may be similar feelings around the goal setting process, so that the idea of like discussing both the board's involvement in like strategy and goal setting as well as in budget, there may be some similarities there that warrant undertaking during the same conversation.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think that there are some resources, some folks at CABE who might be good resources to work with us on and sort of help us have a good conversation about those things.
I think the gentleman from CABE, what was it?
Nick.
Caruso, right,
would
yeah.
be an excellent resource for us, I think. Yeah. Yeah, is everyone sort of in agreement that that would be a good way to approach this?
I'm not sure if we can put it all in one meeting.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm
It
saying,
might
yeah,
be a
I'm not sure
couple
what we
meetings.
just are agreeing to now. Because that was kind of a long explanation of it. So what are we
I think-
actually agreeing to? We want to have a,
I think let us explore the idea of having a retreat at some point this spring. Maybe let's get through this March budget stuff with the Board of Selectmen, and then let's maybe think later in the spring about scheduling a time for us to talk. And I think it sounds like it could be one meeting, it could be two meetings, but let's see what resources are available through CABE to talk to us specifically about organizing our budget timeline and have a finance conversation. And I think there's a possibility additionally to talk about our planning process, how we do that every year. Yeah,
Get in touch with Nick and
and kind of
share
see
it.
what, yeah. All right.
Sounds like
Does the spring timeline sound good? Would be comfortable if we kind of get through March and then maybe think about April or May? Okay. All right, great. Any final thoughts about that? All right, let's move to old business. The first item under old business is Board of Education policies. This is a second reading on two policies. So we're going to look first at policy 4117.6, exit surveys and interviews.
Yeah, so I know we talked about it last time. It's been reviewed by the policy committee. I support it. I think it's a good practice and do it anyway. And I'm happy to share the feedback out with the policy committee. I think it's a great way for the policy committee and the full board to keep your finger on the pulse of very important people who educate our children and provide us the services in their labor and the reasons why they leave us. So I provided you a motion unless there's anybody feeling like we shouldn't do this. Otherwise, by the way, I should say it's state law. We have to, but it's a policy I support.
I make a motion to recommend to the Portland Board of Education the adoption of policy 4117.6, exit interview and surveys.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Sarah. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. That's unanimous.
Maybe Dawn can be our first.
That's funny. Excellent. Next, we're going to look at policy 9323 bylaw. This is a bylaw of the board around construction of the agenda. And again, this is a second read. We talked through this at our last meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the policy 9323 bylaws of the board, construction of the agenda.
Is there a
As presented.
second?
Second.
Seconded by Tim. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous, thank you. All right, old business item B is reflections on the Great Blue Survey results and ongoing facilities improvement planning. And we included this on the agenda because, as you all are aware, we were part of a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen where we heard the results from the Great Blue Survey. And we haven't had a meeting since then to be able to reflect on that as a board, and wanted to just kind of hear thoughts and hear where everybody's at. And Charles and I can share our meeting this past Thursday and kind of.
I'm sure that I missed. I don't know what I
Well, go ahead. Do you want to share?
Sure, happy to. So, Laurel and I met at Valley View last Thursday. Present for that meeting was Bob Shea, Ryan Curley joined us, and 5 gentlemen from Friar, right? And they were there to answer our questions. Ryan had some questions, and I know Laurel had some questions about the process going forward, and send up a drone right over the building and get one more look. Like they wanted to see Valley View one more time. And what their plans are now, and I think they said about 4 to 6 weeks, they will have for us the cost to renovate Valley View to a pre-K-5 school. The idea being that the Great Blue Survey indicated that the preference in the community was for a pre-K-5 Valley View, consolidate to one campus, move the 6th grade to the middle school. So, again, 68% of parents signaled that that was their preference, and 58% of total signaled that that was their preference. So that is what Friar is now doing, giving us the actual number. The numbers that they gave us as part of the facility study committee were, pretty good guesstimates, but we're going to get the actual number. That includes what the cost of the town of Portland would be and what the state reimbursement would be. In addition to that, they're going to give us not a blueprint. That's a $1 million document that you do as part of a building committee and the actual design process. But they're going to give us some suggestions, some blocking diagrams, some renderings, some visuals, a pretty good insight into what a pre-K to 5 Valley View would look like using the Ed Specs plan that I shared with you as the basis for those renderings and those cost projections. Again, I think we'll have that in 4 to 6 weeks. That's going to be a pretty pivotal moment. I know the Board of Selectmen needs to talk about this too, as does the Board of Education. Based on the Great Blue Survey results, I feel like that's the direction that we're heading. Unless, of course, people need to speak up now and say, I am strongly opposed to that and think that would be a horrible idea and keep 3 schools and, whatever it might be. Decision time is coming, but, Laurel and I were interested in getting everybody's feedback, and without asking anybody to vote definitively, here, right, are folks feeling like the Great Blue Survey and the movement in that direction is something you're feeling one way or the other about?
Well, and you may also have seen there was an article in the Middletown Press in which our first selectman has indicated that is definitively the direction that he intends for the Board of Selectmen to move in. And so that was kind of part of our meeting Thursday. And our wonderings about where this board is at, because what we learned is process-wise, the next step will be for the Board of Education to vote on and pass an education specifications plan. We will pass a plan that will go to, we will be waiting on some more concrete numbers from Friar, which should come in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And with the ed specifications plan and those numbers, then it would be to the Board of Selectmen to pass that and move us forward. But the next step is on us to approve a plan.
Yeah. When do you anticipate doing that?
Well, I think right now we need to see the numbers. Right?
Oh, okay.
I think that there are really 3 big pieces of information that I know we're all waiting for. 1, how much? Yeah. Right? What's the dollar amount to do this? 2, what does it look like? I think people are going to want to see on some paper, not just ed specs plans that describes bathrooms and fixtures, but actually what it looks like, a blocking diagram. Mm-hmm. And then 3, the big one, of course, is this municipal bill studies committee that need to bring forward some ideas about what would happen to decommissioned schools. Right? So those 3 things are happening. As those come into focus, I think we'll have all the information we need. Timeline for that. Look, I'm hoping in a reasonable way, April, right? The reason I say that is Stephanie and I have a lot of work to do if we're going to try to get a grant application into the state by June 30th. And we are still, of course, this week, I'm going to be reaching out to the Department of Administrative Services. Her lady's name is Barbara Fazine, and it's a new director there. His name is Doug. We're going to, make sure they're aware of what we're up to. But again, this is what we're doing. If there are members on the board that are like, stop doing that, Charles, we think this is a terrible idea and don't support it and won't vote to approve an ed specs plan, it would be helpful to hear that now as I don't want to get ahead of the board, right? Does that make sense? Which is why Laurel and I kind of talked and said we should talk about this. At least, get consensus that keep going, Charles, keep working. You find out those pieces of information and we too agree with the Great Blue Survey that this is a good direction for our kids.
I'll start off. I definitely, because I've been involved in this since day one, I think this is the right direction. There's a lot of unknowns that hopefully we can check those boxes, because every time I talk to someone, they bring up a question that we don't have the answer. So I just think once we get some of those answers, even if some of them are a little bit rough, like, it's going to cost $70 or $75 million, we need to break that down and make it palatable for people with reimbursement, things like that. So part of my Board of Selectmen comments was going to be the fact that tomorrow night they are going to be discussing, and I plan on being there because I'm a liaison. And so the only thing I hope and I pray that the selectmen are not, and I'm going to use this word loosely, petty, and getting into the weeds and the complaints and what about this, because I recently heard from one of the selectmen said, well, over at Valley View there's a lot of rock there, they accounted for that and all this stuff, and if they're going to go down that rabbit hole, then we may as well not go anyplace. I mean, they got to, I wrote down consensus and collaboration. We got to really answer their questions if they have some legitimate, high-level questions, but hopefully get them on board to support this and put a positive foot forward rather than what about this, what about that, what about this? Well, yeah, we'll try to solve all those things, but we need you to be supportive rather than raise doubt in people's minds. So I think that's the goal that they should be at, is we all get on the same page.
I think Mike Serrano answered the question about the ledge or the rocks that are
Okay, I
back.
wasn't there.
Yeah, he said that would present a problem.
We did. We talked about footprint stuff on Thursday while we were there, and he was kind of confirming what we talked about in our board retreat when he visited our board retreat. When was that? December?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and he was talking about building footprint and the idea of being able to take down one of the classroom wings and build a two-story classroom wing that would provide adequate classroom space, separation of upper elementary students from younger elementary students, but rely on a pretty similar footprint that's already there at Valley View. So it didn't sound like there was a concern from him about anything really environmental.
Yeah, agreed. He was there with a construction guy and others who all were kind of nodding along, going, "This is supremely doable."
Yeah.
They sent the drone up, and he's talking about 2 stories and a new gym, and turning the existing gym into the cafeteria, which would have enough space, because he read the ed specs and he knows that we don't want to be starting lunches at 9 in the morning. And all of the feedback that I heard from him was, this is doable. We can implement the ed specs plan, and Fryer has been with us for 2 years now. They've been privy to all of the concerns about maintaining pre-K, K1 separate from upperclassmen, and school safety and drop-offs and pickups. And I haven't heard Fryer say not doable to anything.
And actually, one thing that is worth mentioning that was reassuring to me, that you mentioned that he brought in, I forget the gentleman's name from the construction company, but they will work independently to with the ed specs plan to come up with some more accurate figures, and then they will compare their numbers and kind of work together to make sure that they're getting us a figure that will really be accurate. It's not just going to be one person's interpretation of it. So I really did appreciate hearing that in terms of trying to get to a figure that will accurately represent the cost of this project.
Well, like Dave, I've lived with it, so I would be interested to hear what other people have to say at this point. I'll reserve my comments.
I'll go next. That it is kind of that speak now or forever hold your peace. I'm not in love with the big school from the get-go. I worked in a big school, now work in a smaller school. I guess my best analogy is the difference between living in a small town and living in a city. And now it will be. I understand they talk about you can separate them out and have your different areas of the building, but they also did talk about there will be times when they're going to the caf or the gym that they will have to be crossing paths or intermingling, and it will be a more, I think, chaotic, busy environment, louder, it just adds to the, that busy feeling of a building versus that small town feeling. Other things, the footprint, I know they've talked about it. I am concerned. I know in the Middletown Press, it talked about doing a traffic study. That hasn't been done. Do we really know what the impact will be on the traffic on High Street? I just feel like I was hoping to have more answers before we got to this point. I feel like the study should have been a part of the decision, but not the end all, or the survey. That we're just taking a survey, which, again, I've withheld my comments, but we do know it could have been an inaccurate survey, that people from even out of town could have taken that survey. So do I think put all of our eggs in that basket on that survey and just use that as our basis? I think it should still be a dialogue between us and the Board of Selectmen or something that to come to that decision. Other things, I understand, yes, I agree. Keeping all the schools open is not ideal. I feel like there needs to be an in-between balance of some sort. I think that's about all of it, I guess, for my thoughts.
Just one comment, because I learned this just recently, that they took a second look at the survey and they looked at the people who provided an email address only to figure they weren't like scrupulous people doing it multiple times, and the percentage for the one school actually went up. So if you took out the whole general population,
If you just looked at
or
the
if you
people
just
who
looked at that
provided an
population,
email address.
yes, people that figured, if other people were out of towners or whatever, but
Interesting.
I'm going to go next because most of what you said, although I've never worked in a school building as a teacher, but I agree with a lot of what Kim said, and for a lot of the same reasons. And I do think the traffic study needs to be done, and I think we need to know more about what. I think we have an idea of Gildersleeve, a couple $1 million to demo and remediate the site. Maybe it could be a decent number, but Brownstone is just, we just don't know what this community would do with that building. And to me, when you look at the numbers, and when I look at the survey, and frame this correctly, when I look at the survey, I have a few thoughts about how it could potentially misrepresent people's real sentiments based on how they understood the questions and the numbers that were put in there, like this will lead to $460 more per year for a house at this, and this will lead to $356. Those are really broad targets because it doesn't include the additional cost of what has to happen with Brownstone and what has to happen with Gildersleeve. And the only way to really compare apples to apples is to understand all of the costs. And we won't really know that. And it may be impossible to ever learn that in advance. But I do think that it's reasonable for us to think along those lines. Again, I agree. Keeping the three separate elementary schools is not a feasible plan. You can't afford it. It's too much. But I'm not sure this single school platform is the answer still for me. I may get there. I don't know. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying right now I'm still wrapping my head around it.
And that's fine and totally fair. There's no pressure to feel like you need to make a decision right now. We just, we kind of needed to just
I didn't think there was.
Get a sense of where people are at.
You said that already.
Because we've heard. Read it in the Middletown Press that Ryan has said that Plan 1 is to reduce to one school. Plan 2 is to keep all three schools. Option B is to keep all three schools. And from where I'm sitting, option B is not an option. That is not a financially sound option for our school district to maintain three separate schools. So I've read that, I've heard that, and I kind of want to know. I'm hoping we can all get to the point where we can.
And I guess I'm bothered by that too. That why? Because a survey of 1,000 people shows that we're now, okay, that's the decision we have to make. Why is that have to be the plan B?
Well, I don't think we would make that decision. They're just saying that the second number of respondents wanted that. And those are the people that probably didn't want their taxes, figured their taxes are going to go up so much higher with a new building that they'd rather just fix what we got. That's what the comments were, fix what we got. And don't realize that we're just going to fix the bare bones minimum. We're not going to get anything new. We're going to be stuck with everything that we currently have that's old, and we're going to get a new roof and a new, boiler.
And continue paying to operate and
And continue to
administer
pay to
3
operate,
elementary
yeah.
schools for 700
Which is what we're
students.
And refurbishing only gets us 25% reimbursement, renovate to new gets you 52%. So there's a huge difference there.
I'll date myself because I was, voting for this building and everything before I knew anything and before I had children I had one child, but not in the school system. And so I think I'm with you, Dave. I feel like this is the right path. I kind of like the concept of, as long as he said he was going to pave High Street, because he did say that in that article too.
Yes, that's right.
That road, but I kind of like the concept of the campus,
Campus, yeah.
kind of with everything up here. I like that concept. Again, you all know I work in healthcare. Transitions, right? So our kids are going and going and going, and they're transitioning, and every point of transition is I don't know if it's a weak spot. It's a
disruption.
It's a vulnerability. I don't know. So I feel like that sense of community can be obtained, and then that community stays. And as people, our little people advance into that school community, then they have that opportunity to kind of be that, big one on campus and in that same space that they've known. So I don't know, that's just kind of my take on things. And I also think that I think better use of the space in these two settings with 6 coming up here, I think that's kind of what we've needed to do for a long time. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I particularly sitting through our December retreat with the architects and going through this budgeting process, am in support of one elementary school, because if we don't significantly reduce costs, we're going to be facing this every year with our budget, and it's painful. And by reducing costs at the elementary school level to the extent that we can, we offer our students the best education that they can receive, so that those funds can go directly to supporting students and staff. And we're having to compromise on that right now. And the architects were very clear about what it would look like to make changes to brownstone to get it up to today's educational standards. And that did not sound like something that I have an appetite for, and the setting that I would want our students in if we have a choice about it, which we do now.
So now I'll have my 2 cents. We have 3 old buildings. We would continue to fix them. It would be reimbursed at a smaller or lesser amount, and we'd still have 3 old buildings. We would not be doing the maintenance on the high school and the middle school, which the sightlines report indicated the elementary schools were behind the 8 ball for maintenance to begin with, and the maintenance on the middle school, high school will also be behind the 8 ball if we continue with 5 schools or 4 schools. So that was my consideration. And the other thing that I considered was what's best for students. And I think the model K-5 is terrific for kids. It's that growing up and looking up to the 5th graders and knowing that someday you can be there. It's the ability for teachers to all be together, and there was a lot of finger pointing from Gildersleeve, from Valley View to Gildersleeve. Well, the Gildersleeve teacher said that Valley View didn't prepare their second graders, and they got them in third grade. This way, everybody's on the same page. The faculty meetings, the PD, all of that can be tailored to the K-5 model, and I think that it's the best for our students. And I think also, I like the idea of having the high school and the middle school available to come down and be the larger role models, the bigger role models for kids, particularly when we're having a shortage of teachers. We might find kids coming down and deciding they love working with the younger kids and they want to be elementary school teachers. They want to teach science or whatever. So I just see so many benefits to it. And the bottom line after this budget year really tells me that we cannot continue to save 5 schools or 3 elementary schools. So it was no secret I wanted a one-school solution after I had seen all plans A through Z. There were a lot of them coming at us. So I'm delighted that I was very skeptical of the survey. I thought, why are we doing that now when we've already come up with a recommendation and everybody's now? It seemed like we were turning the pages back, but I'm thrilled that it turned out to be the way it did, and people really read. I thought they read the questions and answered them in a thoughtful way. And one solution is a lot easier to sell than 5 different plans, and we know that can easily fail when it goes to referendum with too many plans.
Well, I appreciate hearing from all of you for sure, and I'm glad everyone's had a chance to weigh in a little bit. My real hope is that we're going to be able to get to a place, again, waiting on some more information. We did talk about a traffic study on High Street. I know that that's important to Ryan. He expressed that on Thursday in our meeting. There was a little bit of a question about, at what point does that happen? Does it happen now? Does it happen after referendum when the funding from the state is in place? I think that some of that information, some of those details about steps will need to be ironed out still. But it's my hope that we can get on the same page as our selectmen, and that we can, what were the 2 words that you talked about, Dave? Collaboration and consensus, right? Yeah. I really think that sums it up. That's where we need to be. That's how we need to move forward. Because if we're gonna build excitement in our community to be able to take some steps forward and improve our elementary school situation, it's gonna take collaboration and consensus for sure on the part of the Board of Education and Board of Selectmen.
I'm curious how different the traffic study would be from a traffic study on Main Street with Gildersleeve and Brownstone on Main Street, because Brownstone, I live on Main Street, so I just, the getting through, just getting through at that time, I don't know. I'm just curious, if it would be similar, because then you're going to have that starting, I don't know exactly the starting times of Gildersleeve versus Brownstone. Do they start at the same time?
They'll start at the same time.
They'll start at the same time.
Yeah, look, in terms of the traffic study, what Fryer did say is that that is a reimbursable expense. You would need to do that, especially as you increase parking. Every day we watch this building dismiss with students driving. Right. So there are many more cars that leave this campus through one exit. We're here every day, the beginning and end of day, and these guys can probably tell you. It backs up for about 5 minutes, but we have our security guard waving people in, and we keep it moving safely, and we move a lot of cars out, including a lot of buses. And it doesn't back up on High Street. The stop signs are there. The Valley View would dismiss at a different time and have fewer cars leaving if you factor in students.
That's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking it might be a little less disruptive than what Main Street, just because of your lights and because of everything else, and people still can't quite figure out what they're supposed to do when a school bus is stopped, when you are in a.
But it would be something that has to happen to determine whether you needed a stoplight at Valley View or stop signs were sufficient or crossing and whether you would need crossing guards to do that. It would have to happen, but Fryer informed us that you do that as part of a building committee, and it is reimbursable at the general construction rate.
Thanks.
But my back of the napkin assessment, just watching this go every day,
Not that bad. So the example that you gave when we were just chatting about this was graduation, right?
yeah.
That you think about during graduation when the parking lot up here is full and the parking lot at Valley View, the overflow parking lot, is also full, and that graduation ends and within 10 minutes everybody's out of there and cleared away. It's likely comparable in terms of numbers of cars parked.
Right. It would be a lot less cars than graduation.
Well-
We've got 2,000 people for graduation.
We do.
It would be
Literally.
Right.
a quarter of that number.
Yeah.
More or less.
Fryer wasn't anticipating that was going to be something that would impede this moving forward. Anyhow, this is good. This is good. I think I guess we should all kind of give this more thought and tune in tomorrow. I know, Dave, I'll be there as well tomorrow to hear the Board of Selectmen conversation and reflections on the survey results and moving forward. And this is, likely going to be more conversation about this in the near future.
So we're going to move in this direction. I think that we're going to move in what Fryer's doing is getting us good information, and clearly the next piece, the Municipal Studies Committee needs to do its work, and the financials and the renderings and getting a picture of what this would look like. I'm getting a sense this is keep working.
Yeah, well, we definitely need to keep working. I guess the only other thing that they did share with us that was worth mentioning is timeline-wise.
Oh, yeah.
This was a little bit of a surprise to me. So they were, Mike Serrano was saying that whichever architect we end up working with, that it would be probably a year-long process for them to make a plan. So assuming we move forward smoothly, assuming this, our documents get to the state at the end of June, assuming our referendum passes, the question passes in November, and we hear back from the state positively in December that, we've secured the funding. At that point, in January of 2025, that's the point when an architect could start making a plan, developing a plan for us, and that it would likely take the better part of a year for them to make that plan, which means we wouldn't be looking at breaking ground on Valley View on a potential school until 2020, like June 2026, very likely.
Or January. It would be it's 6 months longer than what was in the facility study committee.
Right.
Because it takes a little over a year for the architect firm to make a blueprint.
Right. So I think that, and originally when we were hearing from the committee, they were talking about a 2025 start date, and we would definitely be looking at like spring 2020, spring, summer, spring 2026.
2 more budget cycles.
So that is exactly it. That's the point. That gives us 2 more budget cycles that we're going to have to get through with this in mind.
Unless, of course, the decision is to mothball Valley View and leave it vacant for a year.
Right.
Which is always an option. We've talked about that here, right?
But groundbreak could occur the spring of the year.
It's going to have to go that way eventually, a year later.
That's right.
So if we do it a year earlier,
right.
We
That's
just,
then
because if we wait and they say, geez, we could have started in January, but you're not going to move them until the next fall.
That's right.
Then they could say, hey,
We could move forward.
Yes. So that's going to be part of the calculation for sure.
That's exactly right.
All right. Any final thoughts? Are we okay to move on?
I'm just going to say, because I'm passionate about this, sorry, but we got to realize too, we're not going to please everybody.
Yep.
And I wrote down a couple of examples that, I talked to my neighbor across the street, he has no kids in the school system, he doesn't want to spend $1 on anything. We had the park, where we had a lot of people voted against it, didn't want it, but the majority won. We had the brownstone property purchase down by the river, where I didn't want that and I voted against it, but it won and they bought it anyway. So that's unfortunately the way the ball bounces.
That's the way democracy works.
So that's the way things work. So we just got to keep that in mind, that we can challenge and bring up good questions, but not everybody's gonna get everything they want, you know what I mean? If they don't want us to do anything, or they don't want us to go to one school, you know, they may not get that.
And that's fair. I'm glad you said that, but I would also say that I have heard consistently in everybody, even the people that don't want their taxes to go up realize that having done nothing in these elementary schools for 30 years has put us in a position where it is embarrassing to send kids to Valley View walking under a tarp every day, and when it rains, a waterfall and a river going down the hallway. Like, that is acceptable to no one, I believe. Right now, how you fix that is, I think, where you might find differences of opinion, but something must be done. It's, you know, every day Stephanie tells you, we're talking with Bob, and this pump going, or that thing breaking, or this indoor air quality issue coming up. It's
not conducive to learning, and if we're worried about student achievement and what's best for kids, that's the model. It's not good for kids.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we have to keep in mind.
We are going to have, if we do nothing, like 3 to 5 years until a superintendent tells you the building's condemned, we can't send kids there, or something bad has happened. Look to Deep River. You know, look to other towns that find themselves in very bad spots when schools, buildings fail, right? And that is where we are headed.
Yeah. On that note,
Okay.
let's move on to committee reports. We'll get through these quickly. Curriculum meets in next week? No, in a couple of weeks. I don't have the date in front of me. We haven't met since the last time we talked. Policy.
2:14, but I think we're talking about changing that. I'm not available that day.
I think curriculum is 21 first.
The 21st,
Yeah,
and you
'cause I
can't be
can't
there. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So we're not meeting on the 14th?
I think we thought there was something else going on as well, and so we thought we were going to change that. Trish,
do we
you
is
remember?
policy still meeting on Valentine's Day?
Well, we have discussed, there's nothing on the agenda right now.
Oh, we do have, well,
Graduation requirements and a few
policy
things.
has to talk about graduation requirements. That's a big thing we have to tackle.
Oh, we were going to
We're
invite,
March.
Oh, March, that's
That's
right, because
March.
because Kate is out
right,
for a time here.
Okay.
right, so that was
Okay,
March.
so we're gonna handle that in March. Gotcha.
And that's-
Okay.
So we'll
She's
do
doing
it in
well, but
March.
she's not
We have March 13th scheduled as well.
Yeah.
All right.
I
Personnel.
apologize,
Oh,
so
sorry.
am I taking out the?
Take out the
Take out the
14th.
14th,
Right.
okay.
Are we gonna reschedule or are we just gonna cancel?
Just cancel.
cancel.
Cancel for now?
Yeah,
Great.
Because I think the other graduation and cell phones was the
Correct.
other, there were two big
yeah, and with
ones.
Kate being out, we didn't.
Right.
We don't do either. Okay. Okay, good to know, thanks. All right, personnel has not met. It sounds like
Meeting February 22nd.
that's right.
And that's with Rebecca.
Great. Great. Got the wrong thing open here. All right, buildings and grounds,
No meeting scheduled.
crack?
Next week on the 14th and on the 21st. And they're also going to the Hill on the 21st to, with Kate, to talk about what Craig's legislative agenda is.
Dave, Board of Selectmen?
Nothing significant from last meeting. It was right after our meeting when
Yeah.
we did it, because I had a kind of a quick meeting after that.
Right. Youth Services Advisory Board.
Well, they had a meeting on the 23rd. It was my surgery day, so I wasn't there. I know Meg had
I did
sat in
go.
on that meeting.
I did go.
You updated for this at the last one.
And then the next meeting for them is the 19th of March.
Okay. And Equity and Inclusion Coalition, have you met yet this month?
It meets every other month, so February 12th, yeah.
Okay, great. Excellent. Audience of citizens, do we have anyone who wishes to address the board at this time? No? Okay. Board of Education member comments. We start over here, work our way around.
I don't have any comments this evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Kim?
Oh,
I want to know when those play tickets go on sale.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
what-
My kids, every time we come to the middle school for basketball games, they see the big, it's every weekend. They're like, my middle daughter's getting very excited for Matilda. No. Over here.
In our earlier conversations around the budget and increasing costs and Dawn's presentation, it just made me want to emphasize that I hope it was clear to any parents of children who receive student services from Dawn's comments that you're invaluable members of our community, and I'm really glad that you're a part of this Portland community. And for any parents and family members and caregivers listening, I just think it's really important that you hear that.
I don't think that's enough.
Two things. February is supporting public schools, and everybody got a button from the conference that I went to support public schools. We're encouraged to write letters and to discuss and talk and brag about our schools. And on that happy note, I'm happy the River East always publishes the Dean's List, the kids who have graduated from Portland High who are now doing so well, whatever their choice, whether it's technical or high school or they're getting married, but all of the above. But I'm really glad to see that Portland kids do as well as they do, and I'm grateful for that, because that's what public schools do. They provide the next generation. So I'm always grateful.
I don't think we've mentioned that Sarah and Meg and I were able to attend the Cave Area 8 Legislative Breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
Was it just last week?
Yeah, we did.
Last week down in Westbrook, and there were 6 legislators there. It was a good conversation, and I don't think we talked about it at our board meeting, but I can't actually remember that. It was a good conversation. There was a lot of conversation about reading, curriculum, and about budget challenges, and it's just, it's nice to know we're all in the same boat. All many districts in Area 8, we're all in a very similar boat, and it was a good conversation, and the folks there were listening and were engaging, and I guess we'll see what happens this legislative session.
Which opened yesterday.
All right. I don't think I have anything else. There is no executive session this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Adjourned. Moved.
Meg, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Sarah. All in favor? Aye.